Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Full Crew. I'm Dawn Zoldi, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm Mike Peel, your other co-host. We've got some great guests today, Santh Sathya and Christopher Hewett. We're going to be talking about some interesting stuff, including Biden's national security policy. We're going to be talking about some changes in the way that DoD should be viewing Ukraine. We're also going to be talking about Seagate's new cloud platform and a section that I'm going to be calling Elon facepalms. So we've got, like I said, we've got some great guests today. I want to remind you, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and like button if you're watching on YouTube. That really helps the channel grow. So Santh, tell us a little bit about yourself, elevator rundown.
Great. Well, thanks for having me here, first of all, Don and Mike. Really appreciate it. Great to be here and talking about some really important topics here. And my name is Santh, and I'm the founder CEO of LuftCar. LuftCar is a hydrogen-powered air and road eVTOL vehicle concept, and we are based in Orlando, Florida. We are also present in Virginia, and one of our main goals is to develop a vehicle that will be a warfighter vehicle for the United States, delivering specific missions in emergency response, frontline medication, and so on and so forth. And our concept plays very well in the situation like we see in Ukraine. And on top of that, we are also a dual-use vehicle, which is something that we do in commercial space. There's plenty of use cases in commercial space, and right now we'll stick to the military topic. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michael and Dawn, for having me on. Super excited to be with you guys this morning. And for me, Commander, United States Navy, retired, spent 21 years flying helicopters for the U.S. Navy, also integrating drones into that process. Built the first squadron that had both manned and unmanned rotary wing aviation that was designed to deploy on littoral combat ships. So the three newest things that could be put together in the Navy, which was difficult and where I got all the gray hair. When I quit the Navy back in 2016, went into consulting and worked for two of the big firms out there, bringing drones and unmanned aerial system to consulting, and then moved over to Thales just a year or so ago, and now spend most of my time in North Dakota doing systems implementation and integration of unmanned aerial systems, mostly around transportation management.
Great. So we're going to start with your article today, I believe. So
Yeah.
you brought up Seagate is launching a live cloud analytics platform. Why is this platform important? Why should we be paying attention to it?
Well, I think it's a way of leaning forward, and I've always hearkened to, especially back in the 2009, 2010 timeframe, working with the ASEAN states, and that's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, right? And this is mostly based in Singapore. But they're always forward-leaning when it comes to technology. And what I've been saying for the last few years while doing systems integration and implementation, along with a lot of other people in the industry, is artificial intelligence, machine learning has certain adaptations and limitations of where we want to go for integration of unmanned aerial systems, certainly with the machine learning side of the house, but artificial intelligence, that's the next step, right? In the big data integration, how do we start taking a look at where we are with all of the processes that we've put in place and aggregate all the data that comes out of it? It's not simply just a question of now computers are gathering information. What are we doing with that information, and how are we turning that inward into intensifying and increasing the speed of adaptation of the technology that we're creating? And I think it's fascinating that this group of individuals in Southeast Asia has now gone to a live cloud virtual integration of data and what that means to us as far as the next level of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
So I have to admit, and I want to hear Santh's ideas on this. There are some terms in here that I was like, what are they talking about? Open data lake architecture. I don't know if anybody can explain that, but obviously significant in what they're doing with this kind of multi-cloud, not only data storage, but analytical, kind of back end to the AI. So I don't know if someone can explain what this open data lake architecture is all about.
Yeah, Santh, do you want to take a stab at it, or I can talk?
Oh, you're muted,
You're
my
on mute.
friend.
So I have I have some AI background, but for what I could really infer from that is that you need this large machine learning at the back end to support all your decision making as you go forward. So this open data link architecture will help, what they call the JA2DC, command and communications, that's supposed to set up a warfighter kind of environment for all the divisions within the DoD. So I think it's a necessary information infrastructure setup that needs to happen, and I think they're putting that together. That's pretty much the details I have before I say too much and embarrass myself.
Yeah, so let me put it to you this way, Don. Think about it this way. Your collective memory, which goes into your decision-making process, right, on a daily basis, when you say, I'm going to make a decision to do X, Y, or Z, is based on your experiences in life, right? If this open link architecture now becomes an AI systems repository of information, it is going to be able to select from across that wide array of experiences that are put into a repository that it can choose from based on algorithms that say, I'm going to make a decision. So it broadens the aperture for the machine learning and the artificial intelligence based on the aggregated amount of information that's put into the system.
And that amount of information, they're using this term again, and maybe I have not heard this one, the petabyte scale.
Yes.
I've heard gigabyte, megabyte, like I've never heard petabyte. I know Mike probably has. So how many? What?
1,000, right? Yeah.
Yep.
1,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those scales are basically incremental by 1,000.
Right.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So that's just huge. So Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, if it sounds like what it's being advertised as, sometimes with big data, it's assumed that more data is better, but the other kind of component here, and that's not always true, but the other kind of component here is it seems like there's a structure for basically being able to build and select, what's going to work best for the task. So yeah, it's just I think the biggest thing is it's showing that we are now designing systems, not just hardware, around machine learning in mind. Like this is essentially all computing is gonna, any big project is gonna consider that in the future.
Right.
I think that's a radical shift.
It is, right? And that's why this article was so insanely cool for me, because it was sort of like we have a group of individuals who are now starting to take a look at this for the next generation, what we're going to be doing with computing power, what we're going to be doing with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how that's going to be applicable to all the technologies that we're talking about. This is the tip of the iceberg as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and Santh has a
His
comment.
file structure has been basic. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so from a future standpoint, where this could help the U.S. military would be to construct scenarios for the Asia Pacific, South Asia, or in a confrontation kind of setup, which could be simulated in a training atmosphere, so that the training and simulation can happen to train our military, to train the warfighter to be best positioned when an actual event like that happens. So all of this machine learning that we do and the scenarios that we construct is probably will be helpful for training and simulation, at least immediately.
Well, I was going to say, Mike, they list a whole bunch of different enterprises, besides military, manufacturing, other petabyte data scale industries like semiconductor, which we've talked about a lot on this show, healthcare, retail, energy, again, a hot topic, especially for robotics and uncrewed systems. And what they're talking about here is taking, production that used to take 12 to 18 months and necking that down to less than 4 months. I mean, that's significant when you think about that. So yeah, this is, like you said, Chris, the tip of the iceberg, to be sure.
Yep.
Yeah, and I find it to be absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
No, it's okay.
No, I find it to be fascinating because I think from what we're getting ready to talk about, one of the articles is fantastic. And this is probably a great segue for us to talk about defense acquisitions. Rapid prototyping is the wave of the future, model-based systems engineering, bringing machine learning and AI in to build the requirements around what is required for an acquisition program. I think is going to reduce the time frame of fielding things for our military to be able to get them what they need now, instead of, you know, building something in the 1950s and fielding it in the 1990s.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
that is probably a great segue.
Yeah, on that point, it's a difference between randomized simulation and intelligently selected simulation. So I think that's going to be the big leap. That's the time saving is going to be more than we could actually calculate. All right, let's move on to Santh's article. So Ukraine makes it obvious DoD has to change how it buys weapons. So how so, and why do you think this is important?
Well, the article talks about a couple of things. They touch on the volume, right? So Ukraine sends out what 7,000 shells a week or something like that, and then if you look at the total shell repository in the United States military, that could only we could only spare for like a few weeks. I'm not trying to allude that US is providing all the shells that Ukraine uses, but I'm saying that in terms of quantity, the warfare that's happening in Ukraine is just creating a big demand on the supplies. But then that can be offset a little bit with being a lot more strategic about how the war is being fought and bringing in more autonomy, conducting very specific targeted missions, and also providing relief for the casualties and trying to minimize the conventional warfare requirement. I mean, I'm not using the right terms, but trying to not put a stress on the amount of ammunition that's needed by being very strategic about it. So electrification and autonomy are playing a big role in this conflict, and this would be a precursor to all future conflicts where autonomy and electrification are going to create new products, new technologies, new use cases, and the war will be conducted in a much different manner than what has been done so far. So in our case, I could see dual-use vehicles, dual-use technologies that come from the commercial space that could be adapted to a military situation, whether it is autonomous navigation, whether it is vertical takeoff, landing, lift for flight like the ones that we are doing, or even using a large amounts of data to create scenarios like we talked about in the last segment. So all those commercial technologies could be translated to military, and they could be tried out before, and so that the countries can be well prepared to aid and assist countries like Ukraine in a situation like this. I see with the way the global politics is changing, could see similar conflicts arising where NATO and US will have to offer covert support from outside, and we'll find ourselves in situations like this. So we got to be prepared for to be in conflicts like this and be well trained and have the right kind of technologies in place. So in our case, we are developing LuftCar, which is, again, I'm not trying to advertise the technology, but all I'm saying is that we've got to support DoD's overall priority, which would be a ship to shore and shore to outpost type of missions. So in a landlocked conflict like Ukraine that we see, we got to rely on technologies like that more off. So I'll stop here and then we'll answer further questions.
Yeah, I want to jump in because, basically I agree with everything you're saying, Santh. The limiting factor this article is highlighting is the fact that the acquisition process is so antiquated that we're not able to actually keep up in reality. And that's a concern. And this Ukraine conflict is just really highlighting how broken that is. And Chris, you've been on both sides of the fence, so to speak, right? In the US Navy and now with Thales. This article raises a whole host of issues and makes some suggestions on how that acquisition process can be revamped to help innovative technologies, also non-traditional defense innovation-based DIB companies, right, like break into the market in a quicker, rapid or, more rapid way from prototype to battlefield. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so great question. And my thought is this: the defense industrial base and the acquisition process for the DoD has always been a reactionary process. It's solving for the problem of yesterday. And that is just the antiquated notion of, we have a problem, we need to fix it, we need to go out into the industrial base and find a COTS solution or something that we can apply to the problem today. It is not using an elegant architecture of intellectual thought process. In some respects we do, but for the most part, if we take what we were talking about before with artificial intelligence and machine learning, apply that to wargaming scenarios and derive the most likely requirements, and then start solving for the future of application of technology involved in that, we are now building a smart acquisition lifecycle that will get warfighters what they need in a timely fashion, so that it's just in time for when the actual conflict starts, instead of after the conflict starts, looking back at the industrial base and saying, you guys got anything that we can use for this, because we're really kind of hurting for it.
Yeah, Mike, what are you thinking?
Well, I think that that's an interesting and kind of one of the more novel solutions I've heard to the issue of building to spec rather than building to market. That almost seems like a third path, right? Where we're building to model, right? So we create as many models as possible for possible scenarios, but also the rapid prototyping that we were talking about kind of allows us to be more flexible also and build to task, even if something surprising in terms of conflict zone or necessities within a specific conflict zone arise that we could not have planned for. So I think that's an interesting take, and I think I have some research to do, because that's one of the things that I've always kind of been concerned about, is how do you actually keep the asymmetric information advantage that the military kind of needs, but also benefit from free market or open source, open hardware standards, which tend to be more resilient, if we're being frank about it.
Right.
Yeah, and I was going to say, go ahead, Chris. I was going to just summarize the three main points here. Yeah.
Yeah, but the reality, what Michael's highlighting here is that industry is going to change based on requirements. There's no need that those requirements don't fill some kind of objective requirement for military. Electric distributed propulsion is a classic example of that. There's a civilian use for it and there's a military use for it. Those two things are going to be different, and there needs to be an edge for the military, certainly. But we have to not be afraid to go ahead and say we're gonna step into that realm.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to summarize real quick, the three main points are: we need compressed timelines, guaranteed purchase orders for these companies, and then a blank slate to really work from and think outside the box. Like, I know this isn't a commercial Santh, but I saw his vehicle and I was like completely wowed, because it's literally a truck with like wings attached, and the truck detaches from the wings, right? So just think about that for a second. And the example they gave in the article was, instead of the next anti-tank weapon being some shoulder-launched missile that the Army's so used to, maybe it's a commercial drone, maybe it's a directed energy weapon. Like, again, getting these innovative technologies and these newer companies, these startups, a chance to actually shine and provide that kind of technology that will give that asymmetric advantage on the battlefield is critical.
I want to share a little bit on that. That's a very interesting thing that you raised, Don. We have to listen to our partners more, because a lot of times we fight alongside our partners, or we fight on behalf of our partners, and we got to understand their need as we start putting our technology strategies in place. I'll give a very interesting example. When I talked about LuftCar first to Germany, they said they don't want to fund a warfighting vehicle, they'll fund the commercial version of it. They said no, and the very next day, Russia invaded Ukraine. And then they called me back and said, no, we are interested in vehicle because we do see lots of use cases there. In talking to representatives from countries like Poland, they do see the ramifications of the Ukraine war, and they see the use case of technologies like ours. So that's probably where I would like the U.S. military to put more funding effort and more insight into some of these upcoming technologies, and spend more R&D dollars working with them on a time when we are not actively in the conflict, but get them ready and keep them ready for scenarios like this.
That's probably also a great segue to the national security strategy, which I think is next up, Mike.
Yep.
But I think you want to go ahead and give a shout out to some of our sponsors before we go there.
Yeah, just a quick break. I also want to shout out to our audience, Sahil Boy, hello everyone, and Abu Bakari Abdul Rafiq, hi, watching you live from Ghana. So thank you for tuning in a quarter of the way across the world. So our sponsors are Dragonfly, Akin Gump, L-Site, and Promo Drone. They've been sponsoring for a while now, and we are definitely grateful for their support of the show. And we're also grateful for you, the audience, who has helped the channel grow 130% month over month since we started. All right, so let's get on to national security, Don.
Yeah, you know, I'm sure there are people out there that are just in the commercial, in a commercial emerging tech industry, and you're thinking, oh, why do we care about the national security strategy? You absolutely should care. Like, this is Civics 101, right, Chris? This is like, you know, everybody needs to be reading this document. In addition to the Constitution, which everybody should read if you're in the United States, you need to be reading the national security strategy, especially if you're in the business arena, because whether or not you have a dual use technology, the money is going to go where, you know, our national leaders believe is going to help to kind of defend and grow our country. And so that's what this is all about. And as I always say, the article is great, but go to the source, everybody. And Mike, I think we've got a little image of this. Go to the actual security strategy itself. It is not difficult to read, but there's a couple of things I want to highlight in here. And by the way, this could take like an entire semester or even a whole year to talk about national security strategies, to dive deep into every single word, because every single word in this document is, I will call it action-packed. Every single word has meaning. We don't have the time for that now, but what I will say is, if you've studied any of this over time, you know, it doesn't matter who the president is. These strategies do not change radically between president to president. And it was shocking in Air War College to have them side by side and see Bush versus Obama, right, versus Clinton, and now Trump, right, versus Biden. There's a lot of continuity here, folks, because the ship never goes hard right or left. It keeps moving forward, and there's slight changes in the pattern there, right? And the biggest change in this one is, as you can imagine, a larger emphasis on what the Biden administration has called integrated deterrence, meaning let's integrate not only all of our militaries together, right? It's not Army versus Navy versus the Marine Corps, Space Force, of course, U.S. Coast Guard, DHS, but also working hand in hand with our allies and partners. And we've seen this grow over time. We've seen Finland. We've seen Sweden jump on board NATO. Holy snipes, that was huge, everybody. Okay, so shocking, probably not shocking. Number one threat, they're saying, is China. China is the only competitor with both the intent to reshape international order and the means to do so. And then, of course, Russia, number two, has chosen to pursue an imperialist foreign policy with the goal of overturning key elements of the international order. And I'm not going to go into great detail on either of those, but you need to understand those two premises to understand everything else in the document and where the money's going to go. And that includes, by the way, everybody on this net, to technology. Okay, so technology is critically important to our national security. They call out the importance of the semiconductor supply chain, the Chips and Science Act. They're talking about biotechnology, manufacturing initiative, things like this. They're talking about 5G, digital backbone of the modern economy, other advanced communications, and vendor diversity. So it goes region by region. It talks about in great detail, which we won't have time to get into right now. But I'm going to call out just a couple of things that I think are of interest to our viewers. Attracting a higher volume of STEM talent is a priority for national security. Shocking workforce development. And oh, by the way, we do need to bring over people from other countries into this countries to help us with this problem. Here are some of the sciences, some of the technologies they're shouting out to. Advanced computing, quantum technologies, artificial intelligence, what we've been talking about already on this show, biotech, and biomanufacturing, advanced telecoms, and clean energy technologies. So drones are not called out in this document specifically, but you can see how they touch on across a lot of these uncrewed systems do. And that's all she wrote. I'm going to stop talking here, and I'm going to go to Chris first because I'm sure you've studied all of these things as well. Chris, I'd love to hear your perspective. This is a long-awaited document.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. And to me, it is the first time that I've seen a national security strategy lay the underpinnings for undoing something else that's very unique to our government, which is presidential policy directives. PPDs, when they come out, are set in stone. And one of the ones that is most impactful to us as a country is one that was implemented by President Carter back during the oil embargo crisis, which is PPD 5 and NSPD 42. Which made oil, that word, oil, critically important to the defense and security of the United States of America. And it is a reason why an aircraft carrier is always in the Persian Gulf. And it is a reason why Camp Arifjan is, and Bahrain is, and Dubai is. A lot of that stuff didn't exist before the 70s. And so now we have a presence, an omnipresence in the Persian Gulf. There is an underpinning in the Biden administration to start moving away from fossil fuels and moving to more sustainable energy. And I think that is the beginnings of us starting to say, listen, we need to back away from oil being the strategic driver for all the things that we do with regards to our US military. I love that document. I love the way it sounds. I love the way it feels. And I think it's the beginning of something new for the US military because of it.
Well, I think Santh would agree because he's the hydrogen guy, right? So, Santh, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the document points in the right direction. It shows that the government is thinking about clean energy priorities within military, within homeland security, within national security. All that's great stuff. I really would like to see as next steps a little bit more specifics on how, say, for example, hydrogen is going to be deployed in the Army versus Navy versus Air Force. Right? If I go talk to the individual heads, they say, you know what, we are still assessing on hydrogen. We don't know where we're going to get the hydrogen when we are making these vehicles. So we are not fully bought onto hydrogen as a fuel. But the thing is, that's a question that everybody else faces. Where are we going to get the hydrogen? So you make your hydrogen locally. So those kinds of, that's where this collaboration with commercial entities, with the industries comes in, where Navy and Air Force and Army work along with companies that are already ways ahead in the hydrogen world to make sure those strategies are in place. That way, what's there on policy in a paper can really be enacted pretty soon as you put like really concrete steps. That's what we would like to see, and that will help companies like mine who are trying to accelerate hydrogen economy.
Absolutely. Hey, Mike, what do you think?
I mean, I have some deep thoughts on this, but I don't know how much is really insightful, to be honest. I'll leave this one up to the experts, just because in terms of the nature of the material, I think there's a lot of different ways this can go. I think this is a great statement in terms of actually aligning national identity with this, which, as we had talked about around the CHIPS Act time, was like lacking for almost like 25 years. It seemed. I'll bring up a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson before we move on, and it's a paraphrase quote, but he was talking about how if you look at when we went to the moon, which is a lot of what science nerds love to talk about now, this was aligned with the Department of Defense. We understood this as a defense initiative, both from the engineering side and from the culture side, whereas that kind of doesn't exist in the same way now. And I think a lot of that is just because we just took it for granted or shut programs down or moved away from it. So I think that this will bring a necessary alignment between, I guess, national goals, which actually do lead to us being prosperous, and the communities that can actually support this development, where I think they've been kind of estranged for a couple of years at the very least. Yeah, so we're going to be ending with something a little bit more controversial. because I think we're a little bit more on. Oh, sorry, wrong article. We're going to pop up Elon here. So this was kind of, just a strange turn of events where Elon seemed to be demanding that he's now get paid for the Starlinks he so generously gave away, which is almost like classic Silicon Valley, like I'll put it in your house and then I'll upcharge later kind of tactics. I don't know if that was the original intent or they were literally just staring down the barrel of a budget after a rash decision that seemed like good PR at the time, which if I have to like put some weight on which one it was, I'd probably put it on the latter because that actually seems to be the pattern for this dude at this point. I think he was very, very fortunate, lucky, and smart early in his career, and it just seems to be that he's taking things for granted, that every decision he makes as a gut instinct will have a good result. The irony in this is that, days later, he's like, fine, I'll give it to you for free, after complaining and comparing it to Lockheed and Northrop Grumman. But the difference is those companies didn't offer it for free in the first place. So I'm not sure that stands. Also, there's no shortage of Silicon Valley nerds that are trying to justify this. I don't understand that kind of like subculture of people that will just defend anything Elon says, no matter how stupid it is. I would just like to see him kind of, I don't know, get back to basics a little bit. He's not a dumb dude. He does have his personal problems, but like, I don't know, maybe just stay off Twitter a little bit. That's kind of my take. I'm curious what everybody else's take is on this.
I was going to say, I'd love to hear Santh, because I think this dovetails nicely into his article, where you think about dual use technologies. I mean, we're talking about internet here, right? And he's providing internet for free to Ukraine. And then after the fact coming back, and, I think this does tie into acquisition processes and expectations and all of that. So Santh, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm looking at the value that Starlink will provide in the situation like this, right? So yes, he said it's going to be free, but now there's going to be some costs associated with it. But how does that compare in terms of lead times with all the other JA2DC solutions that the other defense contractors are coming up with, and how impervious it is to the China cybersecurity threat? Right, I mean, China is competing with us on the 5G, and they are building their own communications empire. So we got to see where that really stands. I'm not a technocrat in the space, but it will be nice to evaluate Elon's offering and how it evolves, and see what it really does penny to penny for us. And that's what we should. I mean, I think this will be a very strong business decision for the US DoD to make. But that's what entrepreneurship. Not all entrepreneurs get it right first. Not all entrepreneurs are humble. We have seen that right from Edison days. But that's what it will be. And Elon Musk will not be the first weird entrepreneur, and he'll not be the last weird entrepreneur. So we got to take it on, and we got to look at the solution that these technologies provide, and how they would continue to evolve.
Well, Chris, I think we've seen an unprecedented amount of commercial companies just either giving stuff away and frankly, Elon didn't really give this away. Let's call it what it is. USAID and a whole bunch of countries like Poland, ponying up money to pay for these systems initially, right? So this whole idea that it was free in the first place, I'm not even sure that that's accurate. But the point is, it's really unprecedented for these commercial companies, whether it's Starlink, whether it's a commercial drone company, providing technology outside of normal DoD channels to conflict. So what are your thoughts here? This is maybe an example of what can happen.
It is an example. It's a little bit ahead of its time. And let me start off by saying Elon's super smart. I agree with most of his decisions. He's a great businessman. And for those who are denigrating him about wanting to make money, let's just do a reality check. Businesses are in the job of making money.
Yeah.
Okay. He owes that to his investors, his stockholders. And profit before patriotism it's been a hallmark of the United States of America since way before when, right? Businesses make money, and to have an illusion that they do anything other than that is kind of ridiculous. Now, how you make money. I think Elon misstepped, to Michael's point. He thought what he would do is hand the DoD something that they could use, and then get a contract out of it. But that's not the way the acquisition lifecycle works. So you can give away free anything to the DoD and they'll go, thank you. And then when you say, do you want this in perpetuity? They say, no, we're going to have to do a compete and a down select, and you may not make it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. The acquisition process. But, you know, the reality is this is like 75 million a month of ongoing costs right now. So, you know, I think the big misstep
only makes 2 billion. And not on Starlink.
It's 75 million. I'm sorry, but that's one F-35. Everybody over at Raytheon and Lockheed is just laughing, going, dude, you're complaining about what? I mean, they're like, we waste that much money just.
You know, like in terms of public perception, everybody thinks he's giant, or these companies are giant, but that's because he's a good marketer. But like, you compare that to the traditional military industrial complex, and it's peanuts.
But so here's the thing, right? If you are a 15-year-old phenom, and you're just an unbelievable baseball player, and all of a sudden you get drafted and you wake up one day and you're playing for the Yankees and you're 15 years old. Guess what?
Yeah.
You're playing in the major leagues. Nobody's going to look at you and go, give him a break. He's only 15. No.
Yeah.
You're getting paid.
But there's an issue when you have a big head. I think that's the problem, right? He's his companies have punched above their weight. This is a cool I mean, it goes beyond cool. It's a very, very useful technology. And one of the other issues with being like a disruptor in terms of technology is you might be disrupting on price also. So therefore, you're actually not as profitable as your incumbent competition who's in, let's face it, is there a comparative technology that the DoD is even looking at that would provide the same level of service?
The only thing I can complain about at Elon is at the end of the day, don't whine about being successful.
That's Amen. That's it. Like, and don't make promises you can't keep, right?
Yeah.
Don't tell everybody it's free when you're getting for the first wave of support, 15 million from a whole bunch of stakeholders. And now it's costing money, and it's like, oh, what do we, and everybody needs it. It's like you gave them crack cocaine and then like, don't get addicted. Oh, by the way, who's paying for this crack? So yeah, wow.
Yeah, well, but my biggest thing with him is that this is a pattern now. He's gonna eat 50 some odd billion dollars on Twitter, and his responsibility to his stakeholders is dropping. And like, I think his two main companies, I'll put Boring on the side because I haven't seen anything that is really at the scale of the other two, SpaceX and Tesla, like. Those are great technologies doing great things. So I don't want to see them get bought up by some crap company because he irresponsibly handled the wheel when they were producing awesome stuff. That's kind of where I'm at
Michael,
right now.
I will say this. Everybody acts like Elon is like the newest and greatest thing, so emerging technology focus, so amazing. Howard Hughes dwarfed him in the amount of money he wasted and the amount of technology he created.
Yeah, it's Spruce Goose, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's just one.
You call it what it is. You're not new to us in the United States of America, Elon. You're just another one of amazing inventors and innovators, and guys who have the capital and the capacity to be able to shock the industrial base. Fantastic, thank you. But don't whine about it.
Hey, you know what?
Yeah,
I was going to say this. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and when he's out there tweeting crazy stuff, look, we're all talking about him now because he whined about this, and then he said, I'll just pay for it anyway, right? So, so he stays in the news every week just for this very reason.
Yeah, but what I'll say so that actually is a perfect segue to what my final thought was going to be anyway, is when I think about Steve Jobs, he would have calculated every public interaction to the point where nobody would be angry while they're discussing it. They're still talking about Apple stuff now, and it's not as revolutionary as it used to be because of the tone and the way that they handle marketing, and that really came from him. So I'll just, and not that Jobs was a perfect person. You could definitely ask some of
No,
his employees. He was,
sure.
like you said, from that history of entrepreneurs. They're a little quirky, you know, and you need personalities that are going to drive the mission. But, you know, there are alternate paths to this. I mean, at this point, he's hurting his ability to raise funds by just looking like an ass
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the
so,
difference with Jobs got us to pay for upgrades and smile about it.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
true.
Or a little dongle or whatever. Like anything I do with my computer, I need to buy like 3 more contraptions for it to actually
And
work.
you'd be so happy. You're like, I got this now.
Yay, I've got my dongle.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the new episode title. Anyway, I'm gonna get going. I gotta head off to Japan. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Next week's episode is gonna be pre-taped. We got a cool thing coming up at NBAA BACE tomorrow. Hopefully Tony Drummond will be able to stream live. We've got Will Toppelgagen on Donna
Bill,
Jones.
yeah, Bill. Yep,
And
from Aura Networks.
from Aura, and who you have? Liz Osborne on Thursday for Drone Law Connections.
Yep, anemometers.
All right, and then next week it's David Benowitz and Aaron Rushler. So on Full Crew, that's going to be pre-taped. It's a really good episode. I could promise that it's awesome.
Oh, it's
All right.
crazy good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. We're out.
Well, thank you, Santh and Chris.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and thanks to the audience as always. We'll see you later.